Loyalty was never fashionable, but for Colonel Jonathan Thompson, it was oxygen. The man who had once guarded Queen Elizabeth II through rain, grief, and history now stood beneath the bright June sun of Royal Ascot, 2025, and saw the old order tremble. Cameras flashed, brass bands thundered, and in the gilded carriage ahead of him sat Queen Camilla, smiling with the satisfaction of a woman who believed the crown now belonged to her alone. For most onlookers, it was another pageant. For the colonel, it was a warning. Something in the formation was wrong. The Princess Royal, Anne, the monarch's sister, soldier at heart, defender of ritual, had been moved to the third carriage, behind lesser guests. Tradition dictated she should ride second, beside the Duke of Edinburgh. Someone had changed the order, and that someone could only be Camilla. Whispers spread along the rails before the horses even cleared the parade ring. The Queen Consort is asserting her rank. No, she's the Queen Regent already. The king's too ill to object. The crowd gasped as Camilla raised her hand in a wave that felt more like a proclamation. It was subtle, almost graceful, but Jonathan saw through it. He'd spent decades studying protocol. Every salute, every carriage order, every medal placement told a story. Today's story was rebellion disguised as ceremony. As the band struck God Save the King, Jonathan's eyes remained fixed, not on the anthem subject, but on the woman leading the procession. King Charles III sat beside her, pale, distracted, his gloved hand motionless on his lap. Camilla, radiant in silver and ivory, leaned forward, speaking softly to an aide. The colonel caught fragments of her voice carried by the wind. From now on, I approve the ceremonial order myself. His Majesty is indisposed. He didn't flinch. He simply adjusted the cuff of his uniform, the scarlet tunic that had once brushed the hand of Elizabeth II when she decorated him at Balmoral. She had told him, "Your duty, Jonathan, is not to me. It's to what I represent." Those words had lived beneath his medals ever since. Behind him, Princess Anne's carriage rolled forward. Her eyes met his for a second, sharp, clear, unyielding. No words were needed. She saw it too, the erosion of discipline, the quiet corruption of ritual. The monarchy, built on centuries of order, was being rewritten in real time by a woman who had once promised to stay in the background. By the time the procession ended, the newspapers already had their headline, "Queen Camilla takes lead role as King Charles steps back." But within the barracks of the household division, another headline was whispered, "Colonel Thompson refuses to salute twice." He had performed the salute to the sovereign, as regulation demanded, once. But when Camilla's aide gestured for him to repeat it as she exited her carriage, he stood immobile. It was a gesture so small it almost went unnoticed. Yet for those who understood the language of uniform, it thundered louder than the anthem. Later that evening, inside the officers' mess at Wellington Barracks, Thompson reviewed the reports from his men. Several ceremonial units had been reassigned under direct royal oversight, meaning Camilla's private secretary. Uniform codes were being rewritten, insignia altered. The subtle but deliberate rebranding of the Queen Consort into the Queen. One memo even referred to her as Regent Camilla, a title that did not legally exist. He placed the papers in a folder marked Restricted, Eyes Only Royal Guard Command. Then he locked it. Across London, commentators on late-night television speculated about what they called the Ascot shift. The king's fragile health had forced him into semi-retirement. Camilla had begun hosting weekly audiences alone. Even the Prime Minister's car was now seen arriving at Clarence House, rather than Buckingham Palace. It was, as one journalist said, a peaceful coup wrapped in pearls. Jonathan Thompson didn't deal in politics. He dealt in protocol, the invisible skeleton of monarchy. If the bones were broken, the body would collapse. And tonight, he felt the first fractures. In the quiet of his quarters, he opened a worn envelope, yellowed by time. Inside lay a handwritten note in Queen Elizabeth's script. "Duty is silent courage. Keep watch when others celebrate." He folded it carefully back into his breast pocket. Outside, Big Ben struck 10. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a nation was still celebrating the pageantry of Royal Ascot. But within the heart of the royal machine, lines were being redrawn. Camilla's influence spread through corridors like perfume, sweet, calculated, suffocating. Colonel Thompson extinguished the light, leaving only the faint glow of London beyond his window. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring confrontation. He was a soldier, not a courtier. His loyalty lay not to personalities but to principles. And if the monarchy itself were under siege, from within, then loyalty would no longer mean obedience. It would mean resistance. The morning after Royal Ascot, the air inside Wellington Barracks felt heavier than usual, the kind of heaviness soldiers recognize before a command they don't agree with. Colonel Jonathan Thompson stood at the parade ground, watching his men drill in perfect silence. Polished boots struck the cobblestones with mechanical precision, but something in the rhythm felt off. It wasn't the soldiers, it was the system. A courier approached. "Message from Clarence House, sir," marked urgent and confidential. Thompson broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting wasn't the king's. It was the sharp, slanted signature of Camilla R., written with the assurance of someone who no longer needed permission. Effective immediately, all ceremonial formations shall be reviewed by the office of the Queen. The Princess Royal's oversight of regimental protocol is suspended pending internal evaluation. All correspondence on ceremonial matters shall be directed to my private secretary. Camilla R. The colonel read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and placed it back into the envelope, as if it were a loaded weapon. This was no routine adjustment. It was a command to obedience. Within hours, the barracks buzzed with confusion. Anne's longtime adjutant called, his voice thin with disbelief. "They've stripped her ceremonial authority, Jonathan. The Princess Royal's been told she's temporarily relieved of organizational duties. Temporarily, my foot. This is a takeover." Jonathan said nothing. Words could be dangerous now. He merely replied, "Understood," and hung up. That afternoon, he was summoned to Clarence House. The corridors there smelled of lavender and power. Portraits of Queen Elizabeth still hung along the walls, but a new portrait, Camilla, seated beside a resting King Charles, had been placed at the staircase landing. The message was unmistakable. She was the constant presence now, the reigning image. He was shown into the green drawing room. Camilla stood by the window, a glass of white wine in hand. The king sat in an armchair, reading silently, a blanket draped over his knees. His eyes flickered toward Jonathan, faintly grateful, faintly weary. "Colonel," Camilla began, her tone cordial but clipped. "Royal Ascot went splendidly, don't you think? The public adored it." Thompson kept his voice measured. "It was an honor to serve, Your Majesty." "Our Majesty, Colonel," she corrected softly. "I speak for both of us now. His Majesty needs rest, and someone must ensure continuity. You, of all people, should appreciate order." "I do, ma'am. Order and the rules that preserve it." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Rules are living things, Colonel. They evolve, just as crowns do." "Oh." The king shifted in his chair, as if wanting to speak. But Camilla's hand rested gently on his arm, a gesture of care that looked more like control. "I trust," she continued, "that you will help me modernize our traditions. Some of these old hierarchies only confuse the public. Too many uniforms, too much rigidity. It's time the monarchy breathes." Jonathan stood straight. "With respect, ma'am, the uniform is the breath. It tells the world there is still structure when everything else changes." Camilla's eyes hardened. "Are you refusing my directive?" "I am serving the institution, not its occupants," he said quietly. "That has always been my duty." For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the faint tick of the clock. Then she set down her glass. "That will be all, Colonel. I trust your loyalty will not waver when it matters." He saluted once, precisely, and left. Outside, the courtyard shimmered with afternoon light, but he felt the chill of something beginning. Camilla's order would dismantle the invisible spine of monarchy, the chain of respect, the choreography of discipline. And without that spine, the body would collapse into vanity. Back at Wellington Barracks, the colonel convened his senior officers. The atmosphere was tense. Captain Marlowe, young and fiery, slammed his hand on the table. "She's not the commander-in-chief. The king hasn't signed a thing." "Lower your voice," Thompson said. "We act within regulation. No rumors, no defiance. We hold the line by precision, not protest." "What line, sir?" another officer asked. "When the palace itself erases it?" Jonathan paused. "Then we become the memory of it." That night, he drafted a report for the Privy Council, a discreet memorandum outlining concerns about procedural irregularities within ceremonial governance. He sent it through a trusted channel, coded in the language only old courtiers would understand. Hours later, his phone vibrated. A single message from Princess Anne. "You saw it too. Do not yield. The crown remembers." He exhaled slowly. Loyalty wasn't silence anymore. It was quiet resistance. In the press, speculation grew. Rumors spoke of Queen Camilla's expanded constitutional role. Pundits debated if she was acting as regent in all but name. The palace issued no clarification. Inside the guard, however, every man knew something sacred had shifted. Camilla's new insignia, a crowned C interlaced with laurel leaves, appeared overnight on official letterheads. The term Queen Regent began circulating in internal correspondence. Jonathan tore one of those documents in half. Then he pinned the halves to his notice board under a single heading written in his own hand. Integrity is not optional. He looked at the photograph on his desk, the late Queen Elizabeth shaking his hand in 2019, her expression calm, resolute. The same composure that had guided Britain through storms now felt like a ghost beside him. Outside, the bells of Westminster tolled midnight. In Clarence House, a new power was awake and writing its own script. But within Wellington Barracks, a soldier stood guard over the last unwritten law, the one that said loyalty ends only when truth does. Tomorrow, there would be more orders, and he would obey none that dishonored the oath he had sworn before a dying queen. The next week unfolded like a slow, tightening noose. Royal Ascot had ended, but the tremors it caused were only beginning to shake the foundations of the monarchy. The press called it the dawn of a new regency, while palace insiders whispered the word Jonathan Thompson refused to say aloud, usurpation. Inside Clarence House, a new rhythm had taken hold, and it didn't march to the king's heartbeat anymore. Visitors now entered through the queen's corridor. Meetings were stamped with the monogram CR, and every royal aide knew whose approval mattered. The king's health was cited as fragile, but Jonathan, who had seen Charles only days earlier, knew weakness was not the reason for silence. It was controlled. He had spent his entire career believing that silence protected the crown. Now he saw it could also suffocate it. One evening, an encrypted message arrived on his secure line, the kind reserved for emergencies within the household division. It bore the initials A.R. Street James's, East Wing, 2,200 hours. Alone. Princess Anne's handwriting was unmistakable. When he arrived, the palace corridors were dimly lit, lined with portraits of kings and queens whose eyes seemed to follow him. The East Wing was deserted except for one lamp burning beneath a portrait of Queen Mary. Anne was already there, wearing her uniform coat, no jewels, no guards, no courtiers, only steel and purpose. "Jonathan," she said, her voice low. "Close the door." "He did." "She's moving faster than we thought," Anne continued. "The Royal Ceremonial Office is now under her secretary's supervision. She's ordered a modernization review of the household cavalry. They want to merge your division into a new structure, something called the Queen's Command Unit." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "A private army under her name." Anne nodded. "Precisely. And Charles," she hesitated. "He doesn't protest. Either he's too ill, or he's chosen peace over confrontation." "She's isolating him," Jonathan said quietly. "Even his aides can't speak to him without her permission. The guard at Clarence House was replaced yesterday without authorization from my office. And if war." Anne paced the room, the click of her boots echoing off the marble. "This isn't about ceremony anymore. It's about control. Once she consolidates the regiments, she'll have the power to dictate who guards whom and who doesn't. Imagine a queen consort with command over military protocol. It undermines the very hierarchy of monarchy." Jonathan looked toward the portrait of Elizabeth II that hung opposite the window. "Her Majesty once told me that tradition is the monarchy's armor. Without it, all that's left is costume." Anne stopped pacing. "Then we must protect that armor, Colonel, even if it means standing against a queen." A silence hung between them, the silence of two people who had already made their choice, but were still weighing the cost. Anne walked to a small table and slid a folder across to him. Inside were copies of internal memos, lists of donors, discrete transactions, and the names of consultants connected to offshore firms, the same pattern that had destroyed Beatrice's peace the year before. At the top of one document was a heading, Ascot Foundation Trust, Patron, Her Majesty Queen Camilla. Jonathan frowned. "A charitable shell?" "Worse," Anne said. "A financial lever. She's consolidating influence among the same figures who fund state occasions. She controls appearances and the money behind them." He closed the folder. "Does anyone else know?" "No one who would act," she said. "The courtiers are terrified. The Prime Minister won't move without evidence, which means we must gather it ourselves." Jonathan took a breath. He was a soldier, not a spy, but the duty was the same: defend the realm, no matter the battlefield. "I can access internal transport logs," he said. "Every car, every security detail, every change in escort protocol. If she's moving assets or people through the guards network, we'll know." Anne nodded. "Good. Do it quietly. If we confront her before we're ready, she'll claim we've overstepped. And she'll be right legally, if not morally." As he turned to leave, Anne said softly, "Jonathan, one more thing. If anything happens to me, you'll carry this forward. You've earned the trust of every guard in the regiment. They'll follow your signal." He paused, meeting her gaze. "My loyalty began with your mother, ma'am. It will end only when the crown itself does." Outside the palace, London slept under a calm sky, but in the colonel's mind, The city was already divided between those who served the monarchy and those who served the throne's new occupant. That night, Jonathan entered his office and locked the door. He activated the secure terminal used for interdepartmental reports. Within minutes, he was inside the palace database. Dozens of newly issued orders had been filed in the past 72 hours, every one of them marked with Camilla's authorization code. He scrolled through transport logs, personnel shifts, funding allocations. Then he saw it, an entry labeled Special Security Directive, Operation Ascendant. Its purpose field read simply, to ensure the stability of the crown in the event of transitional incapacity. He leaned back in his chair. Transitional incapacity. That phrase had only one meaning in royal code: a temporary removal of sovereign authority. It was a regency trigger. If that directive was enacted, Camilla would legally act as regent without parliamentary vote or consent. Jonathan's pulse steadied. He printed the document, stamped it confidential, level red, and sealed it in a secure pouch. Then, from the far end of the barracks, he heard something he hadn't expected. Laughter, light, careless, echoing from a group of aides leaving the officers' hall. One of them was reading the evening paper. "Look at this headline," he joked. "Queen Camilla to bring firm hand to royal operations. About time someone took charge." Jonathan's hands clenched at his sides. To them, it was gossip. To him, it was treason disguised as progress. As he walked back to his quarters, a single thought anchored him. Order must have a defender. He stopped at the door, turned on the dim lamp, and opened his logbook. Beneath the date, he wrote, "The Queen's legacy is under siege by her own successor. Silence is complicity. Tomorrow begins the countermeasure." Outside, the city lights shimmered like 1,000 watching eyes. Inside, a soldier prepared for the quietest rebellion in British history. Dawn broke cold and metallic over London. The sky above Buckingham Palace looked like burnished steel, the kind that preceded a storm. Inside her private study, Princess Anne sat before a blank sheet of letterhead embossed with the royal crest. The fountain pen in her hand trembled only once, the hesitation of someone who knew that a single page could change the course of monarchy. The letter she was about to write was not one of ceremony or condolence. It was a declaration, a formal report to the Privy Council warning of procedural manipulation within royal governance. The words were precise, chosen with the caution of a soldier writing to generals. But beneath them ran a quiet pulse of fury. Camilla had crossed a sacred line. Anne had just received confirmation that the Operation Ascendant directive Jonathan uncovered had been quietly authorized. It was not yet enacted, but it existed, signed under the guise of ensuring continuity, should the king be temporarily unable to perform his duties. The clause was a dagger wrapped in silk. If activated, it would make Camilla regent in practice, ruler without coronation. Anne began to write, "It is my solemn duty to express concern over the improper consolidation of authority under Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, in contradiction to established constitutional and ceremonial precedent." Her handwriting was crisp, deliberate. Every sentence was both accusation and act of loyalty, not to individuals, but to the crown itself. In another part of the city, Colonel Jonathan Thompson read a draft of the same letter. He had helped compose sections detailing military procedural anomalies. Together, they had built a dossier strong enough to force attention, if not yet action. But fate moved faster than paper. Before the document could leave the palace, it was intercepted. A junior clerk, one of Camilla's new hires, flagged it for royal review. Within an hour, the letter reached Clarence's house. By sunset, the Queen's communications team had buried it beneath a press release, praising her modernization of royal functions. Anne's words never saw daylight. That evening, she met Jonathan in the chapel corridor of St. James's Palace. "They stopped it," she said simply. "I know," he replied. "They'll say it was administrative oversight. It never is." Her expression hardened. "Then we proceed without paper." "Meaning?" "Meaning we hold the line ourselves," she said. "We restore the old order by action, not appeal. You will command the Ascot Guard during next month's commemoration parade. I want every man in full regalia, crimson tunics, plumed helmets, the way my mother demanded. No modern uniforms, no new insignia." Jonathan hesitated. That would directly defy her instruction. "Then let it be defiance," Anne said, eyes glinting. "If the people must choose whom to follow, let them see who still stands for the monarchy they recognize." End. Outside, the evening bells tolled across London. Inside the chapel, their echoes seemed to consecrate an unspoken vow. Anne turned to him, her voice softer now. "My mother trusted you with her safety. I trust you with her legacy." Jonathan bowed his head. "And I will not fail either." When she left, he remained standing before the altar. The light from the stained glass cast crimson reflections on his uniform, as if the spirit of the old queen herself were watching. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, Camilla dined with diplomats, smiling over crystal glasses, as if the world already belonged to her. But in the quiet corridors of St. James's, a new front had formed. The monarchy was dividing not by blood, but by belief. The morning of the commemoration parade began with tension thick as fog. Soldiers lined the courtyard of Windsor Castle, boots polished to a mirror shine, buttons glinting under a pale English Sunday. Every uniform was perfect, the old uniform, the crimson and gold pattern of Queen Elizabeth's era. Colonel Jonathan Thompson had ensured it himself, against every modernization order that had come from Clarence House. Royal protocol dictated that Camilla, now styling herself as Her Majesty the Queen, would arrive first. But Thompson had rewritten the schedule quietly, deliberately. The parade would open with Princess Anne, wearing her full military regalia, standing at the head of the royal guard. It was no longer a ceremony. It was a declaration. At 11:10, the trumpet sounded. The castle gates opened. Anne stepped forward, tall, disciplined, eyes blazing with resolve. She did not smile, did not wave. Her expression spoke of lineage and loyalty, the kind of authority that needed no crown to command respect. The crowd fell silent. Then, from behind, came the rumble of another carriage. Camilla's. The Queen's motorcade entered the courtyard with all the pomp of conquest. She wore silver again, the same color as her ascot Triumph, but this time, adorned with a diamond clasp shaped like a crown. The symbolism was clear. This was her reign now. As she descended the steps, she froze. The entire regiment stood in formation, not in the new Queen's Command Unit attire she had approved, but in the ceremonial dress of the late Queen Elizabeth II, the scarlet tunics, the white plumes, the insignia of the old sovereign still stitched over their hearts. Camilla's smile faltered. "Colonel Thompson," she said sharply, striding toward him, "explain this breach of directive." He saluted once, perfectly. "This is not a breach, ma'am. This is preservation. The commemoration honors Her late Majesty, whose traditions are the foundation of the monarchy." Her eyes narrowed. "I gave explicit instructions. Those orders were ignored." "With respect, Your Majesty," he said, voice calm, "orders that erase history are not royal. They are personal." Gasps rippled through the officers. Camilla's aides shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered, "Ma'am, the press is filming." Cameras clicked furiously. The image would soon travel across the world, the Queen confronting the soldier who refused to obey her. Anne stepped forward, her tone quiet but firm. "Colonel Thompson acted under my supervision. The guard answers to the crown, not to convenience." Camilla turned to her, voice dripping with venom. "You've overstepped, Anne. The monarchy cannot survive if it stays trapped in your mother's century." Anne didn't blink. "The monarchy won't survive if it forgets who built it." Enda. The colonel stood between them, his posture a living line of defense. He didn't move when Camilla's aide hissed, "Stand down," nor when the Queen herself demanded, "You will be relieved of command for insubordination." Jonathan replied quietly, "You may relieve me of my title, ma'am, but not of my oath." The courtyard went still. Then, in a moment no one had planned, the soldiers behind him, hundreds of them, raised their rifles in silent salute, the traditional mark of honor reserved for the sovereign. But their salute was turned not toward Camilla, it was turned toward Princess Anne. The sound of polished steel rising in unison echoed like thunder. Camilla's face turned white. She realized what the world was seeing, a divided monarchy, one side draped in discipline, the other in ambition. The cameras kept rolling. The crowd, at first unsure, began to cheer not for rebellion, but for recognition, for the symbols they trusted, for the loyalty that could not be bought or branded. Camilla turned abruptly and retreated toward her carriage, her entourage scrambling behind her. As she vanished into the distance, Anne leaned toward Jonathan and said softly, "You understand this means war." He nodded. "Then it will be fought with honor." Said. That evening, footage of the confrontation flooded every channel. Headlines screamed, "Colonel Thompson defies the Queen Guard stand with Anne." Some called it mutiny, others called it courage. But for the people, it was something deeper, a moment that reminded them what the crown had once meant. In the barracks, Jonathan removed his cap and placed it beside the photograph of Queen Elizabeth on his desk. He stood alone, yet at peace. His uniform bore the faint scent of gun polish and rain, the perfume of duty fulfilled. Outside, thunder rolled over Windsor. Inside, a single soldier whispered to the memory of his queen, "Ma'am, the guard still stands." Windsor awoke beneath a bruised sky. The events of the previous day had shaken the nation to its core and the monarchy to its foundation. Every newspaper in Britain carried the same image: Colonel Jonathan Thompson standing rigid and unflinching before Queen Camilla, his scarlet tunic like a banner of defiance. The photo was splashed across front pages under headlines that screamed, "The Queen's Guard Rebels, the soldier who stood for Elizabeth, and Anne's army." Inside Buckingham Palace, the air was colder than the stone walls. Overnight, Camilla had summoned her advisors, demanding that Thompson be dismissed for insubordination and theatrical disobedience. But it wasn't so simple. The colonel was no ordinary guard. He was the keeper of the household order, the man whose loyalty had been recorded in official archives stretching back to Queen Elizabeth's reign. To remove him without cause would trigger parliamentary scrutiny, and the palace could not afford another scandal. Still, Camilla was determined. "This cannot stand," she snapped, pacing before her mirror. Her reflection glared back, distorted by the morning light. "He humiliated the crown. My crown." Her private secretary hesitated. "With respect, Your Majesty, the people are sympathetic to him. Even the Veterans Associations have issued statements praising his conduct as noble restraint." Camilla turned sharply. Restraint? It was a rebellion wrapped in sentimentality, a public challenge to royal authority. "End of tea." "Perhaps," the secretary said quietly. "It was loyalty, just not to you." Camilla's expression hardened. "Then, they will learn who the crown truly belongs to." At Wellington Barracks, Jonathan stood in the same office where he had drafted reports for 3 monarchs. Outside his window, soldiers drilled in silence. No music, no chatter, just the rhythmic echo of boots. They knew the storm was coming. A sealed letter arrived that afternoon, carried by a pale-faced courier. The insignia of the Queen Regent gleamed on the envelope. "Colonel Jonathan Thompson is hereby relieved of all ceremonial duties pending review by the Royal Commission of Protocol, effective immediately." He read it once, folded it, and placed it neatly beside his sword. There was no anger in his eyes, only resolve. When Princess Anne arrived hours later, she found him in full dress uniform, inspecting the line of guards one final time. "They're ready," he said simply. "For what?" she asked. "For the truth to outlive us." She looked at him for a long moment. "They'll paint you as a relic, Jonathan, a man clinging to ghosts." He smiled faintly. "Then let them remember which ghosts built this kingdom." That evening, the Privy Council convened. The room was dim, filled with whispers and the faint ticking of a grandfather clock. At the head of the table sat the king, frail, silent, but present. It was the first time in weeks he had attended a royal session. Camilla began first, her tone icy and formal. "Your Majesty, it has become necessary to address the matter of insubordination within the household division. Colonel Thompson's actions..." But she stopped. The king's hand had lifted, trembling slightly. "Enough," he said, voice quiet but sharp. "You have mistaken loyalty for defiance, Camilla. You have mistaken guardianship for opposition." She froze. "Charles, please." "No," he interrupted. "This family has survived because of duty, not dominance. You have overstepped every boundary of restraint and humility. Elizabeth trusted him. I trust him. And if the guard stands with Anne, perhaps it is because she represents the crown's conscience, not its shadow." The silence that followed was the sound of an empire holding its breath. Camilla's lips tightened, her composure cracking for the first time. "You're defending them?" "I'm defending the monarchy from arrogance," the king said softly. "From both of us, perhaps." He turned to the council. "Effective immediately. All ceremonial authority reverts to the office of the Princess Royal. Colonel Thompson will resume command of the household division. The Queen Consort shall take a period of retreat from official duties." Camilla stared at him in disbelief. "You can't mean..." "It's done," Charles said, closing his eyes. "The monarchy will not be a mirror for ambition." The announcement reached the public by dawn. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, not to jeer or celebrate, but to watch, to witness the quiet transfer of moral power from one chapter of history to another. Anne stepped onto the balcony that afternoon, standing beside her brother. Her speech was short, steady, and unsentimental. "The crown endures not because it commands, but because it serves. Today we honor those who remembered that truth when it mattered most." Down below, the household guard stood in formation, led once again by Colonel Jonathan Thompson. When he saluted the king and Princess Anne, the roar of the crowd filled the streets, not as rebellion, but as redemption. In the days that followed, Camilla withdrew from public life. Rumors swirled that she had retreated to Ray Mill House, refusing to appear at any state function. Inside the palace, her rooms were quietly stripped of the title Queen Regent. The gold nameplates that bore her personal crest were removed. One evening, alone before her mirror, Camilla studied her reflection. For the first time, she saw not power, but isolation. "You can keep your soldiers, Anne," she whispered bitterly. But the people forget quickly. Her reflection did not answer. The mirror remained cold and still. A week later, in the chapel of St. George's, the king awarded Colonel Jonathan Thompson the Royal Medal of Integrity, a decoration created in honor of unyielding service to the crown's true essence. The king's voice broke slightly as he pinned the medal to Jonathan's chest. "Your loyalty," he said, "reminds us what cannot be rewritten." The colonel bowed his head, the weight of the medal heavy but rightful. Around him, soldiers stood in silence, not mourning, not protesting, but honoring. Outside, the bells of Windsor rang once more, not for a coronation, nor a rebellion, but for something older, purer, the survival of honor. Jonathan looked up at the stained glass above the altar, Queen Elizabeth's profile cast in soft color, and whispered under his breath, "It's safe now, ma'am." The monarchy had survived another war, not of armies, but of conscience. And history would remember this truth. When ambition tried to rewrite the crown, one soldier's loyalty held the line.